So for today's earthing broadcast from the park, I wanted to do something special. And when it's a beautiful day like this, I like to come out here and do a little grounding or earthing, and have a little green protein shake and talk about cool stuff. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is this chapter from this research. It's called Modified Health Effects of Non-Ionizing Electromagnetic Radiation Combined with Other Agents Reported in the Biomedical Literature. And it's kind of a meaty title. I want to thank Tom for sending me this last week. Appreciate that. And this is by Ronald Kostoff and Clifford Lau, and it was from last year. And it's a really important thing to think about. And this goes back to stuff that I've thought about for years, and have for many years actually recommended to people that I knew that were cigarette smokers, like, hey, you might not want to smoke that cigarette while you talk on the phone, because if you look into the research, you'll see that the use of a cell phone, electromagnetic radiation, radiofrequency microwaves, actually affect the blood-brain barrier and can cause opening of the blood-brain barrier in situations where you might not want that. And when you're smoking a cigarette, that's when you're going to be exposed to other toxins that could be more toxic to the brain, that normally this blood-brain barrier is preventing these toxins from getting in. So that, combined with other kind of similar related things, is covered very thoroughly in this kind of unique type of meta-analysis that they did in this report. And you'll see below this broadcast, or if you're looking at the replay, I'll have a link in there, or I have already put a link in there, so you'll see that there also right away if you're looking at this live. And so this is it's kind of a meaty report. Goes into a lot of real detail about the studies. The way they did it was through search query analysis. It's kind of an interesting way of analyzing data from years and years of study, and they go over that in this report. And in this video, I'm just trying to just discuss this and kind of summarize some of the things, some of the notes that I came across when reviewing this report. But just to get back to that summary, a lot of this has to do with drug interactions, but it also ties into nutritional supplements that can be used to block some of the adverse symptoms of radiofrequency and EMF. So it's pretty interesting. It's a very, very interesting and very comprehensive report. So this is and this is to cover both antagonistic and synergistic type of effects. So this is not just one-sided. It's both for adverse and beneficial effects from these. So even though a lot of this report does talk about drug interactions, I think that's just a reflection of where the funding is with these studies. So keep that in mind too. That the funding, so, and they get into this in this report. The funding really largely controls the type of data that we see in the literature. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I'll get into that a little bit more as I get further into this summary. So we're talking about the combined effects. So this is like the combination of a chemical, whether it be a drug or a toxin, combined with EMF, whether it's a low frequency EMF from power distribution power EMF, low frequency 60 or 50 hertz from electrical wiring or transformers, or microwave radiation from wireless telecommunications, as well as some discussion on radar technology and millimeter wave, which is used like in the airports and things like that. So this is it's a combination. That's the whole point of this, was the analysis of combination of these electromagnetic effects along with a chemical or even a potential nutrient. So because in the real world we have such a complex of so many different toxin exposures, this is a simplified thing because they can only compare, one or two different chemicals at the same time as electromagnetics in various studies, whereas in the real world we're exposed to all these different chemicals and all these different forms of radiation and EMF. And also included in this analysis is the combination of electromagnetic, non-ionizing electromagnetic effects along with radiation, like from X-rays and other radiation technology, such as radiotherapy, different types of things like that. So it's a combination of lab experiments, epidemiological research, and different source materials, all agglomerated based on keyword research, essentially from these databases, and so getting into it, there's starting off the cancer research is electroporation. So and if you follow my friend Dr. Keith Scott Mumby, did a report on irreversible electroporation and the understanding of that kind of technology and how it's used in mainstream medical research, even though a lot of the historical stuff wasn't really credited. So that's where electroporation that's a positive effect. Various chemotherapeutic agents came up in this research. So the radiofrequency and EMF and PEMF in some cases seems to increase permeability, so as to increase absorption, thereby in some cases lowering the doses of chemotherapy, which is pretty interesting. And then again, radiation combined with RF in order to increase apoptosis. Obviously the goal of the radiation is to cause apoptosis, to cause the cancerous cells to die off. That's called apoptosis, and the goal of the combination of radio frequency with the radiation is to increase the apoptosis or apoptotic effect, or decrease the amount of radiation needed to cause the apoptotic effect. And then we've got chemical promoters. So we've got both proactive and passive chemical promoters were analyzed. An example of a passive promoter would be like in a study where the rats that were diabetic were the only ones that had blood-brain barrier permeability when exposed to radiofrequency or EMF, as opposed to, so that brings about like a genetic differentiation. So or a disease category being a situation where the exposure may result in further disorder. So as opposed to a proactive promoter, which would be a chemical that would cause the effect regardless of the of whether the rat was diabetic or not, So, and then electromagnetic promoters, as I mentioned. So we're talking about radio frequency combined with low frequency EMF, and that causing an increased cancer risk, for example. So that's another thing that was covered. And getting into the neurological system, we have radio frequency combined with drugs for enhanced anesthesia, analgesia. So increased duration for the same dose was one of the things that came up. So there's potential for lowering dosages with combined radio frequency, reduction in seizures with EMF and the certain pharmaceuticals, pain reduction, frequency dependent EMF. So in this case, both positive and negative repercussions were noted in the literature. So, and that is a common thread throughout this report. Is there's quite a bit of stuff that's frequency dependent. So it's not real clear cut based on even just a frequency range. It's a lot of it's very frequency dependent. And then again, neurologically, the performance degradation was noted in some of the literature when combining the pharmaceuticals and the RF and non-ionizing radiation and EMF. Then getting into cardiovascular, a lot of it has to do with drug combination therapies, combining the common drugs with radio frequency and EMF, PEMF, in order to reduce various risk factors and also increase uptake of the drugs. Enhanced delivery and immune system was one of the, a lot of it again came into drug uptake and vaccine uptake for DNA vaccines and things like that. Then getting into the endocrine system, this was one of the subjects addressed was a way of actually applying insulin through the skin using electromagnetics, basically electroosmosis of insulin. So that's kind of interesting. And but again, there's also some potential for chromosomal damage, and even in fetal development when there's another agent that has the potential to cause the chromosomal damage. So not as much direct, but when there's another agent involved. So it's really interesting research. All this stuff, skeletal system, calcium and PEMF to improve bone integrity and healing. Plus, again, lots of drug combinations. But this starts to get into some of what I found really interesting in this report, which related to also nutritional uptake. But there's room for so much more research in this realm. I think it's just a factor of just not being funded. Personally, there's a lot of issues with that kind of stuff. But then getting into DNA damage, again, enhanced chemical antagonists, chemical and X-ray, and again potentially affecting fetal development. So that's very significant. And getting into the nitty-gritty of how this is really affecting cellular, the cellular biochemistry and metabolism is interesting. On the beneficial side, like I mentioned, we've got electropollution with drugs, increasing apoptosis, increasing cell proliferation. But the apoptotic effect actually can be both a positive and negative effect, because some of that apoptotic effect is actually affecting healthy cells. So, we're talking specifically in combination with certain drugs. So it's important to keep all that in mind. But permeation is one of the main effects here that's both positive and negative, because we've got permeation to help increase uptake of drugs, but we've also got this negative side of the same coin, which is chemical toxins and increased uptake of chemical toxins. And getting back to what I was talking about before, which was the increased blood-brain barrier permeability, which is a big factor. So when we have more and more toxins in our environment that are potentially harmful, and we're exposing ourselves to all these fields and radiofrequency radiation that has the potential to open the blood-brain barrier, this is a significant factor. And cell proliferation is another interesting aspect. There was a study mentioned about aloe healing, so a combination with aloe for healing of wounds, speeding up of healing of wounds. And then we get into oxidative damage, mostly negative. This has to do with chemical promoters, and in combination with these electromagnetic effects causing increased oxidative damage. And then we've got cell growth, differentiation, mostly again toxins and chemicals. This is mostly on the negative side. Then there was even some discussion on microorganisms, and this related to food storage, chemical preservatives. so increasing the effectiveness of some of the chemical preservatives. And then we got into some of the interesting stuff as far as I'm concerned. Attenuation of EMF effects, which get into like things like propolis, melatonin, vitamin C and E, and zinc. Those were some of the main things. L-carnitine as well, and bee venom, another interesting one, which was found to be radioprotective. Zinc attenuates increased lipid peroxidation from EMF in the brain. And propolis, one of the main constituents in propolis is protective against mobile phone induced oxidative kidney damage or impairment in rats. Then N-acetylcysteine and EGCG, which is epigallocatechin gallate, which is the green tea extract. It's one of the primary constituents in green tea extract. And NAC, N-acetylcysteine, have a liver protective EMF oxidative stress. So basically, the oxidative stress caused from low frequency, like power line and power frequency, house wiring and such, oxidative stress was attenuated by those two things, NAC and EGCG. And then and another interesting thing was combined microwave radiation, RF radiation, and salmonella. The LD50 was lowered, and this was from research that went pretty far back. But that's kind of interesting. The LD50 is like the lethal dose of where 50% of the group would be dead. So this was a mouse or rat study, which they found a consistent lowered LD50 when the microwave RF was added in addition to the salmonella, as opposed to just the salmonella itself. And and then there's a really good section in the back of this report about underreporting of adverse events, and getting into the reasons for that. And I've talked about this from some other books that I've personally read and reported on over the years. But the critical research is often not funded. Some of the research is not submitted for publication. Often poor research is published while good research is not published. There's always the manufactured research, which is it's a reality now. I mean, we know this now. There's a lot of manufactured research, and I'll get into some of the details in that in a sec. But also, some of the published research is not always very accessible. It can be behind expensive paywalls, like membership sites that are only accessible typically to universities. Incentives for inadequate literature, industry, government, journal editors, researchers, a lot of issues there. Policy implications. We have publication bias. There's some mention of there's one in Microwave News from Louis Slesson, if I'm pronouncing that right, and then the Bioinitiative report talking about 75 to 80% of negative studies are funded by industry or U.S. Air Force. So, and we're talking about no effect studies. So these are significant, you know, and yeah, and so that about sums it up as far as this report goes. You know, let me know your thoughts on this. I'd be looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Yeah, and like I said, down below this video in the description, you'll see a link to where you can download this. Even if you only, you know, even if you just skim through it, you might find some interesting stuff in there. And definitely a huge amount of citations. So there's that too, if you like looking at citations like I do. So yeah, and you know, check out healthharmonic.com. That's my website. And I'll also, you know, below this in the description, I'm also linking where you can get my report called The Case Against Frequency Generators, which is one of my reports. And so, you know, I urge you to check that out too. And yeah, like I said, check out healthharmonic.com. See what we got over there, and let me know your thoughts on all this. And you know, the usual, if you like what you watched here, subscribe and share this and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.